Hi guys, Martin here coming to you with my full build and final reveal video for the Monogram 1/48 scale Hawker Harrier. This is an original boxing, the first boxing from the original new tool, 1981. It's kit number 5420. There's the box. This was my first entry into the 50th anniversary Hawker Harrier buddy build that I hosted. It just ended. The votes have just come in, and I still to release the winner announcement video. But anyway, first I want to thank Mr. Bob Dyer for sending this to me amongst all those other kits. This was a kit he said I could build for this buddy build. And what do I think about the kit? For an original 1981 tooling, I think it's a great kit. It doesn't have recessed panel lines, but I think it's really well engineered. It went together great. No problems with it whatsoever. All I did was I used the raised panel lines as guides and to scribe next to them. And then when I'd scribed the panel lines next to the raised lines, I just sanded them down smooth. So that's the only thing I had to do to it. The kit offers you two marking options, one for a British Harrier GR1 version with markings XV776 and a US Marine Corps AV-8A version with markings VMAT-203. Now you're kind of forced to lean to that if you want to have underwing stores, because it doesn't come with the correct stores or any stores for the British version. You don't get the rocket pods and underwing drop tanks. What it comes with is the AIM 9L sidewinders and some bombs. Excuse me. So I like to have underwing stores, so I went for the American AV-8A version. And other than that, I don't know what to say, except I really enjoyed the build. It's a great kit, even though it's raised panel lines. Everything goes together great. You can have the canopy open or close, that's an option. Flaps, I cut the flaps out. They're moulded in solid. I just cut round the panel lines so I could show them glued in the down position. And that's it. Nothing else to say. It's a good kit for the age, and I don't know the price of it. It's been reboxed twice since 1981 and new parts added since 1981. I don't know what those new parts are. Probably the underwing stores for a British version, I don't know. Anyway, no more waffling guys. I'm going to let you go on and see the video slideshow now for the full build and final reveal. Dyer guys, chocks away. So that's the box art showing a Harrier AV-8A version, US Marine Corps. Inside the box we had grey sprues, they were loose, and the decals there show you the options for a British GR1 and the US Marine Corps AV-8A, and black and white instruction booklet. First I washed the parts with warm soapy water, left them to air dry. Then after that I cut parts off that are going to go into sub-assemblies, cut them from the sprues, laid them out, and that's all the undercarriage, struts and outrigger wheels. I then cut away the flaps on the air intakes, then glued those into the open position, give them some more interest. And then the sub-assemblies were put onto cocktail sticks. I scribed the panel lines on those. I then scribed the panel lines on the wing assembly areas, the horizontal stabilizers, and that was followed by the fuselage halves. Everything was then put onto cocktail sticks, washed with isopropyl alcohol, and then primed with black Stynol res primer. The inside of the fuselage halves were primed as well, and then the exterior parts were primed with a grey Stynol res primer. I then painted the interior of the cockpit with a grey paint, and then painted the underside parts with the light camouflage grey. And then the missiles and the air intake was painted white and the jet turbine blade silver. Bombs were painted a dark olive green, and the pylons, the in-flight fuel probe and one of the air intakes were painted with the upper side camouflage green. I then detailed the interior parts, followed by the undercarriage parts and outrigger wheels. I then detailed the pylons and the in-flight fuel probe, and they were followed by the missiles and the bombs. I then painted the jet exhausts and their heat deflector plates, followed by the inside of the air brake door and the undercarriage wells. I then detail painted the forward undercarriage wheel well, and then gloss clear coated all the painted areas to seal those in to make them ready for some weathering. The first thing I did was apply a dark dirt wash, which was black oil paint, thinned down with odourless mineral spirits, brushed on, left to dry for 45 minutes to an hour, and then rubbed off with kitchen roll. And then everything was sealed in with a flat clear coat. The pilot was then assembled into the cockpit. Before he disappears into the fuselage halves, I took a few snapshots. And this photograph shows him assembled into the starboard side fuselage half along with the jet turbine and air intake parts. I then did the wheel wells on the underside. Then glued the two fuselage halves together, clamped and taped them till set. And then I cut out the flaps off the wings and drilled the holes for locating the pylons. I then glued the upper wing halves to the lower wing assembly, clamped and taped till set, then glued it to the fuselage assembly. Next was the port side air intake that got glued in place, followed by the starboard air intake. I then prepared for masking the windshield and canopy. Glued the Aiden gun pods onto the underside, followed by the HUD display screen. That's a rear view of it. And after doing that, I could glue the windshield in place and temporarily locate the sliding canopy. Everything was then given a wash with isopropyl alcohol. I then masked the air intakes, followed by the wheel bays with damp tissue and some tape. I then used grey Stynol res, primed the model all over along with the flaps, and that was followed by the pre-shading. That's the upper side, that's the lower side. I then airbrushed the light camouflage grey on the underside, and I mixed a bit of white with that to tone it down to produce highlights. What was left of that paint I used on the top side to do a marbling effect and added some light brown as well. Just wanted to give that a try, see what this marbling thing's all about. I then sealed that all in, the light grey, with a gloss clear coat. Then went on to making masks, so measuring the length of the model on the painting instructions and comparing it to the length of the actual model. I got a scale factor, used that on my photocopier to magnify the painting instructions to the size of the model. I then cut out the views and cut out the camouflage patterns, and I could stick those down onto the model. But before I did that, I wanted to mask the underside with Tamiya tape so the light camouflage grey was protected. I then masked, excuse me, stuck down the masks that represent the green, leaving the areas for the dark sea grey to be airbrushed on. I used XF54 Tamiya, added some white to tone it down to do highlights. I then removed all the masking to check the paintwork. It looked okay, so I then sealed that grey in with a gloss clear coat to protect it from the masks that are going to go down on top of that. There, the masks in place and the spaces in between were airbrushed with the dark green. I used Tamiya XF81, 50% mixed with 50% Model Master RAF dark green, then added some white to tone that down to do some highlights. I then removed the mask, checked the paintwork, looked good, so then it was on to adding the details. I painted those tan areas on the tail, along with the red light on top of the fuselage and the green starboard side navigation light. And then it was on to the red navigation light. I then checked the underside after removing all the masking. Everything looked good. So I sealed all that paintwork in with a gloss clear coat to make it ready for decals. But before I decaled, I glued the flaps in the down position, and the horizontal stabilizers were glued into position as well. And that's a view on the underside, just showing the flaps hanging down there. And then the decals were prepared along with all the equipment I needed to apply them. Decals on the pylons and the front of the outrigger wheels were put on first, followed by the 3 decals on the underside. The starboard side with all its decals applied. Port side with all the decals applied. And then on the top side, where the leading edge meets the fuselage, that hole there, there's no decal to put around that, so I used a fine marker pen to draw a rectangle around that, and the same with the squares on the engine bay cover. So after that was all done, I could gloss clear coat those decals to seal them in, and then it was on to weathering. So I started off with a pin wash for the panel lines, just black oil mixed with odorless mineral spirits. That's the underside. Let it dry for a bit, then rub it off with kitchen roll. And then created a bleach wash, used white oil paint, added a little bit of black to make it light grey, and then use that to tone down the decals and some of the panel areas. Then taking some coloured crayons, pencils, I applied streaks all over the aircraft, the pylons, the bombs and the wheels, and when that was done, that was all sealed in with a final matte clear coat, so she was ready for final assembly. First thing assembled was the canopy in the open position, and that was followed by the undercarriage. Then the pylons were glued in place, and that was followed by gluing in the wheel bay doors. And then the air brake door and the actuator, and then the missiles and bombs were glued onto the pylons. After that, I glued the outrigger wheels in place. That's the port side, and then the starboard side. After that, I glued the in-flight refueling probe in place, and that was followed by the small antennas on top there behind the canopy. That's the large antenna aerial on the spine of the aircraft. I then glued in the pitot tube and that thingamajig in front of the cockpit. I then painted the pitot tube silver, and then she was all done. That's the final assembly complete. So then I thought I'd scratch build some air intake covers using 2mm thick card wrapped with wine bottle foil. Painted that red, made some handles out of wine bottle foil, painted those black, and then did a little bit of chipping on those handles. I then made the end caps for the missiles using a piece of sprue, drilled out the center, sectioned them down to length, Added a bit of plastic card to create handles and painted those yellow and put them in place. I then made red and white stripe remove before flight tags using wine bottle foil, painted red and white, and then applied those strategically onto places around the aircraft. And that was it, guys. It was all done. So let's move on to the final reveal, see how she looks. Tally-ho, chocks away.